Hello. I'm posting here because I need outside perspective, and because if I don't write this down somewhere, I'm going to start gaslighting myself into thinking I imagined it. I'm 32M. My fiancé is 30F. We welcomed our son 6 weeks ago. That sentence alone should tell you this is supposed to be a happy story. It isn't. The moment that keeps replaying in my head didn't happen during labor, or the sleepless nights, or the panic of realizing a human being is now fully dependent on us. It happened on a quiet afternoon in our apartment, sunlight coming through the blinds, our son asleep against my chest. She was sitting across from me on the couch, scrolling on her phone, not even looking at the baby. Then she said it. "I carried this child for 9 months, she said, casually. "I deserve a house. Not we should plan for a house. Not our family needs stability. Not let's talk about the future. A statement. A demand. A transaction." I looked down at my son. His tiny hand was wrapped around my finger, trusting, unaware. And something inside me clicked off. I nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't say no. I didn't even ask what she meant. I just said nothing. She noticed. "Why are you quiet?" she asked, already annoyed. "I heard you," I said. She smiled, satisfied, and went back to her phone like the conversation was finished. That was the first time I realized I wasn't being seen as a partner anymore. I was being evaluated, priced, measured against what I could provide now that she had what she wanted. Over the next few days, the comments kept coming. Renting with a baby is embarrassing. My friend's husband bought a place before their kid was born. I sacrificed my body. The least you can do is step up. Every sentence wrapped in entitlement, not gratitude, not teamwork, just leverage. I didn't push back. I didn't explode. I started paying attention. And once you really see someone, it's impossible to unsee them. That's when I began planning my exit. Quietly. The thing about not reacting is that it confuses people who are used to control. After that day, she started circling the idea instead of stating it outright. Zillow links sent by accident. TikToks about providing men. Comments slipped into conversations with friends while I was in the room. "Some men just figure it out once the baby comes," she said once, laughing, eyes flicking to me to make sure I caught it. I always did. We weren't struggling. That's the part that still matters to me. I make good money. We weren't late on bills. Our son had everything he needed. The apartment was clean, safe, warm. But it wasn't enough. Not because of the baby, but because of what she believed motherhood entitled her to. She'd started keeping score. "I destroyed my body for this," she said one night, standing in front of the mirror, tugging at loose skin like it was evidence in a trial. "You can't expect me to live like this forever." I didn't respond. "You're really quiet lately," she snapped. "Are you mad?" "No," I said. "Just listening." She didn't like that answer. The more silent I became, the louder she got. She framed everything as sacrifice, hers. Never ours. Never mutual. When I got up for night feedings, she said, "Well, you didn't grow him." When I scheduled the pediatrician, she said, "I already handled the hard part." When I mentioned budgeting, she scoffed. "If you were really a provider, this wouldn't even be a conversation." That word. Provider. Not father. Not partner. ATM with a conscience. One afternoon, while I was changing our son, she leaned in the doorway and said, "So when are you going to start acting like a dad and buy us a house?" I looked at my son's face. Red. Peaceful. Completely unaware that he was being used as collateral. That night, while she slept, I opened my laptop and didn't look at houses. I looked at lawyers. Custody laws. Trusts. Long-term planning. What protection actually looks like when love stops being safe. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. And once clarity shows up, it doesn't leave. Once I stopped pushing back, she started rewriting history. That's what people do when they sense resistance but don't want to admit it exists. They adjust the story until they're the hero again. She began telling people we had decided a house was the next step. I told him I don't want our baby growing up in an apartment, she said to her sister on speakerphone. And he agreed. I hadn't. But I didn't correct her. I was still learning something important. She wasn't talking to me anymore. She was talking over me, assuming silence meant consent. At night, she'd scroll listings and shove her phone in my face. "This one has a nursery already. This one has a yard. Babies need fresh air. If you loved your son, you'd want better for him." Always framed around the baby. Always implied that hesitation meant failure. When I suggested waiting a year, letting things stabilize, seeing how parenting actually felt, she laughed. "Men always say that," she said. "That's just fear." "No," I replied. "That's planning." She rolled her eyes. "You don't get it. I earned this." That word again. Earned. Not we built. Not we're growing. She carried the child, therefore she was owed assets. That was the math. One night, she said something that still sits wrong in my chest. If we split, she said casually, you'd still have to provide. So honestly, it's smarter to just do the right thing now. I looked at her. Is that how you see this? She shrugged. That's reality. That's when I realized something painful but clarifying. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was confident she couldn't. The baby, in her mind, had locked me in. That night, I moved my important documents into a folder. Birth certificate copies. Financial statements. Everything quiet, everything calm. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning protection. And for the first time since our son was born, I felt like I was actually being a father because I was thinking long-term, not emotionally. She mistook my silence for surrender. She was wrong. By the 4th week, she stopped pretending this was a discussion. It became a countdown. Every conversation somehow bent back toward the house. If I mentioned sleep deprivation, she blamed the apartment. If the baby cried at night, it was because this place has bad energy. If she was in a bad mood, it was because she felt trapped. Trapped. In a 2-bedroom apartment I paid for. With a healthy child. With a partner who got up for night feedings, cooked, cleaned, worked full-time, and never once reminded her of it. One morning, while I was warming a bottle, she said, I've been thinking. That sentence had started to mean brace yourself. I don't feel secure, she continued. A real man would make sure his family has property. I handed her the bottle and said nothing. She scoffed. You're not even going to respond. What do you want me to say? I asked. That you understand, she snapped. That you're stepping up. There it was. Not partnership. Performance. Later that day, her mom stopped by unannounced. I should have seen it coming. She held the baby, cooed for a bit, then said, So, have you two talked about buying yet? My fiancé answered for me. He knows it's time. I corrected her calmly. We've talked. We haven't decided. The room went quiet. Her mom pursed her lips. Well, stability is important. Especially for a child. My fiancé crossed her arms. I gave up my body, my career momentum, everything. The least I deserve is a house. Deserve. I felt something shift again. Not anger, not sadness. Recognition. This wasn't about a home. It was about compensation. I nodded slowly, stood up, and said I needed air. On the balcony, holding my phone, listening to them through the glass, I realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. She believed motherhood gave her ownership over my future. And if I didn't draw a line now, my son would grow up watching his father be negotiated instead of respected. That night, I scheduled a consultation with a family attorney. I still loved my child more than anything. But I was starting to understand that loving him meant leaving her. The lawyer's office was quiet in a way that felt intentional. Neutral walls. Neutral tone. No judgment. Just facts. I didn't go in angry. I went in prepared. I explained everything plainly. We weren't married. We shared a newborn. And the relationship was deteriorating fast. I said I wanted to protect my child without escalating conflict. I wanted shared custody, financial stability, and zero surprises. The lawyer nodded. That's doable. And smart. That word, smart, hit harder than I expected. We talked about custody schedules that favored consistency, about documenting involvement, about separating assets cleanly before resentment turned nuclear, about trust funds, not as leverage, but as insulation, for my son, not for either of us. When I got home, she was on the couch with the baby, scrolling listings again. I found one I love, she said without looking up. You should see it. I sat down across from her. We need to talk. She sighed dramatically. About what? If this is another delay. It's about us, I said. And the baby. That got her attention. I told her calmly that I wasn't ready to buy a house. That I needed time. That pressure and ultimatums weren't okay. That love wasn't supposed to feel like a negotiation. She laughed. Actually laughed. You're being dramatic, she said. This is what families do. No, I replied. This is what transactions do. Her face hardened. So what? You're threatening to leave. I'm telling you I won't be forced, I said. She stood up, holding the baby tighter than necessary. You wouldn't dare. You're not walking away from your child. I wouldn't, I said. Ever. She smiled then, confident, almost smug. Exactly. That smile is burned into my memory. Because it told me everything. She didn't see me as someone who could leave. She saw me as someone who was trapped. That night, while she slept, I transferred money into a new account. Just the beginning. Labeled clearly. Documented. For my son. I wasn't disappearing. I was preparing, and the quiet part was almost over. After that conversation, something subtle changed in her. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She adjusted. That's the part people don't warn you about. When someone realizes pressure isn't working, they don't always push harder. Sometimes they get strategic. She started acting softer, kinder, almost cooperative. I know I came on strong, she said one morning while I fed the baby. I'm just hormonal. You know how it is after birth. I nodded. She made a show of thanking me for things she'd never acknowledged before. Night feedings, diaper changes, grocery runs. Each thank you felt rehearsed, like she was checking boxes. Then came the subtle tests. So if we did buy, she said casually one afternoon, you'd put it in both our names, right? It wouldn't be fair otherwise. I'm not buying, I replied. She blinked. I know. I'm just saying. Hypothetically. Hypotheticals are where boundaries go to die. A few days later, she tried guilt. I just don't want our son to grow up remembering we struggled, she said, rocking him dramatically. I don't want him asking why his dad couldn't provide. That one stung, not because it was true, but because it was calculated. I looked at her. He's 6 weeks old, and one day he'll know, she said quietly. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, rereading notes from the lawyer, custody timelines, mediation steps, financial separation. I wasn't rushing, but I wasn't hesitating anymore either. The next morning, she noticed the shift. You're different, she said. Distant. I'm focused, I replied. On what? She asked. Our son, I said. And what kind of environment he grows up in. She frowned. With his parents together, I hope. I met her eyes. With adults who respect each other. She didn't answer. And for the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across her face. Not about losing the house, but about losing control of the narrative. Because I wasn't arguing anymore. I wasn't defending myself. I was preparing to move forward without her permission. And that scared her more than any fight ever could. The moment she realized I wasn't bending anymore, she made a mistake. She assumed escalation would force compliance. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I came home early from work and found her on the phone in the bedroom, door half closed. I wasn't trying to listen, but when you hear your name, you stop. Yes, she said, annoyed. He's dragging his feet, but once I talk to a realtor, he'll come around. He doesn't really have a choice. I stood there, completely still. He won't leave, she continued. He's a dad now. Worst case, the court makes him provide anyway. The words landed clean. No anger. No hesitation. Just certainty. That was the moment something snapped. Not emotionally, but structurally. Like realizing a bridge you're standing on was never anchored on the other side. I walked away quietly and sat in the kitchen, hands steady, breathing slow. When she came out, she froze. How long were you home? She asked. Long enough, I said. She scoffed. Oh my God, don't be dramatic. I was venting. You were planning, I replied. She rolled her eyes. This is what happens when men feel threatened. You twist things. No, I said calmly. This is what happens when assumptions get spoken out loud. Her tone sharpened. You're acting like I'm the enemy. I looked at her. You're acting like I'm an obligation. She laughed bitterly. So what? You think you can just walk away? No, I said. I think I can walk forward. She crossed her arms. You won't do anything. You're too responsible. That sentence told me everything. She didn't believe I'd leave because she believed responsibility belonged only to her definition of family, obedience, money, compliance. That night, after she fell asleep with the baby on her chest, I moved quietly through the apartment. I packed a bag. I copied files. I documented everything. Not out of fear, out of resolve. Because I finally understood something critical. She didn't think love kept me there. She thought law did. And she was about to learn the difference. I didn't leave that night. Not yet. People think leaving is a single dramatic act, slamming doors, shouting, tears. For me, it was administrative. Careful. Deliberate. I stayed for another 2 weeks, and in that time, I learned exactly how little she noticed when she wasn't in control. I still woke up for night feedings. Still changed diapers. Still held my son until he fell asleep on my chest, his breathing steady, his trust absolute. I documented everything. Pediatrician visits, feeding schedules, bedtimes, photos, messages, proof of presence. She, meanwhile, grew more careless. She talked openly about when we buy again, as if the conversation with the realtor she'd scheduled, without telling me, was already a done deal. She even said once your name's on the mortgage, everything will calm down. That sentence was almost funny. One evening, she said. If you leave, you'll regret it. Courts don't go easy on dads. I looked at her and replied, I'm not planning to disappear. She smirked. Then what are you planning? I didn't answer. A few days later, while she was out with friends, I packed quietly. Not everything. Just my clothes, my work equipment, and copies of every document that mattered. I left the crib, the stroller, half the furniture. None of it was about stuff. Before I left, I stood in the nursery for a long time. My son slept there, unaware that his parents' relationship had already ended in everything but paperwork. When I walked out, there was no note, no announcement, just absence. The next morning, I filed for shared custody. Not full, not vindictive, shared, structured, stable. I set up a trust fund in my son's name that same week. Automatic deposits. Untouchable. Documented. Protected. I didn't block her number. I didn't need to. Her messages came fast once she realized what I'd done. Confusion first. Then anger. Then fear. You can't do this without talking to me, she wrote. I could. And I did. Not because I stopped loving my child, but because I refused to let him grow up watching love be treated like a bill that always came due. She didn't notice right away. That's what still gets me. It took almost 12 hours for the realization to land. Long enough for her to assume I was at work or running errands or doing one of the countless things I'd always done without announcement. Then the messages started. Where are you? You didn't say you were leaving. You can't just take space when there's a baby involved. I didn't reply immediately, not to punish her, because I was in a meeting with my lawyer, finalizing the temporary custody schedule. When I did respond, I kept it short. I'm nearby. I've filed for shared custody. We'll coordinate through the proper channels. That's when the tone shifted. She called. I didn't answer. She texted again, longer this time. This is insane. You're acting like I did something wrong. You're really choosing paperwork over your family? After everything I sacrificed? There it was again. Sacrifice as currency. Later that night, she showed up at my place unannounced. She looked different, messy, shaken, no script ready. She held the baby carrier like a shield. You blindsided me, she said, voice trembling. You don't get to just decide this on your own. I didn't, I replied calmly. I decided for myself. The court decides for our son. She scoffed. You're punishing me. No, I said. I'm protecting him. Her eyes narrowed. From what? I didn't answer right away. I looked at our son instead. Asleep. Peaceful. Innocent. From growing up thinking love is owed, I said. Or that one parent gets to control the other because they carried more weight at some point. She laughed bitterly. So now I'm a villain. No, I said. You're just not my partner anymore. That's when she cried. Not the performative kind. The real kind. But it didn't move me the way it used to. Because once someone tells you, out loud, that you don't have a choice, the moment you prove them wrong is the moment the relationship ends. And she finally understood that I wasn't coming back. Not to fight. Not to negotiate. Not to be leveraged. Only to co-parent. Quietly. Cleanly. Legally. This will be the last update I post, because this is where the story stops being about conflict and starts being about clarity. After the panic faded, after the angry messages slowed, something else happened. Silence. Not peaceful silence. Strategic silence. She stopped texting me directly and started speaking through other people. Her mom, a mutual friend, even her cousin, who suddenly wanted to check in and remind me how hard postpartum can be. I listened. I didn't engage. Everything important was already in motion. The custody arrangement was temporary but solid. Weekdays split. Weekends alternating. Clear language. No ambiguity. The trust fund paperwork was finalized shortly after. My lawyer made sure it was airtight. Funds that could only be used for our child. Education. Healthcare. Housing for him, if needed. Not for lifestyle upgrades. Not for leverage. When she finally asked to talk, one last time, I agreed. We met in a public park. She brought the baby. I brought copies of everything. She looked tired. Not just new mom tired, disillusioned tired. Like the story she'd been telling herself had collapsed, and she didn't know what to replace it with. I never said you were just money, she said quietly. I know, I replied. You didn't have to. She swallowed. I just wanted security. And I wanted partnership, I said. Those aren't opposites. But you turned one into a weapon. She looked down at our son. So this is it. Yes, I said. This is what healthy looks like now. She didn't argue. She didn't threaten. She just nodded. I walked away that day without anger. Without triumph. Without regret. I didn't leave my child. I didn't abandon my responsibilities. I didn't disappear. I left a relationship where love became a transaction and fatherhood was treated like collateral. My son will grow up knowing I chose him, just not at the cost of myself. And if that makes me the villain in her version of the story, I can live with that. Because in my son's story, I'll be present, steady, and free. And that's the ending that matters. Bye-bye.